The metal doors of Neo Geneva Orbital Station slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Jake Morrison stepped through. His boots made quiet sounds on the polished floor as he walked down the main corridor. The station was busy as always, with people from dozens of different worlds moving around. Some had blue skin, others had extra arms, and a few floated in small bubbles of water. But Jake barely noticed them anymore. After 20 years in space, alien faces were as normal to him as human ones. Jake wore his favorite old leather jacket, the one with small tears near the left shoulder. His jeans were faded and comfortable, and his black boots had seen better days. He looked like any regular person you might meet on the street, not like someone who had saved 3 entire star systems from destruction. That was exactly how Jake liked it. He stopped in front of a store with shiny glass windows and gold letters that spelled out Chronos Elite. Inside, he could see rows of expensive watches sitting under bright lights. Each one probably cost more than most people made in a year. Jake took a deep breath and pushed open the door. A small bell rang as he entered. The store smelled like expensive leather and metal polish. Everything was perfect and clean. The walls were white, the floors were black marble, and soft music played from hidden speakers. Jake felt a little out of place, but he had good reason to be there. Behind the main counter stood a tall man in a perfect black suit. His hair was slicked back with gel, and his shoes were so shiny they reflected the ceiling lights. This was Pete Hamilton, the store manager. Pete looked up when Jake entered, and his face immediately changed. His smile disappeared, and his eyes narrowed as he looked Jake up and down. "Can I help you?" Pete asked, but his voice made it clear he did not want to help at all. Jake walked closer to the counter. "Yes, I'm looking for something special. A watch for my first officer. He's retiring next month after 30 years of service." Pete's eyebrows went up. "First officer? Are you in the military?" "I'm a starship captain," Jake said simply. Pete looked at Jake's clothes again and made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "Right, a starship captain." He did not believe Jake at all. "Sir, I think you might be in the wrong place. Our watches start at 50,000 credits. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the general store on level 7. Jake's face stayed calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I know how much things cost here. I'm looking for a Patek Philippe vintage Earth model. Pre-war if you have one." Now Pete was sure this shabby-looking man was trying to waste his time. Pre-war Earth watches were some of the most expensive items in the galaxy. Only the richest people could afford them, and this guy looked like he slept in his clothes. "Sir," Pete said, his voice getting colder, "those watches cost over 500,000 credits each. I don't think you understand what you're asking for." "I understand perfectly," Jake replied. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it. "I want to see what you have available." Pete straightened his tie and walked around the counter. He was taller than Jake and tried to use his height to look down at him. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I run a serious business here. I can't have people wandering in off the street and wasting my time. Why don't you go find somewhere more suitable for your budget?" Other customers in the store began to notice what was happening. A well-dressed alien with purple skin stopped looking at watches and turned to watch. A human woman in expensive clothes also looked over, frowning. Jake stood very still. "I'm not playing any games. I want to buy a watch for someone who deserves it. Can you help me or not?" "No, I cannot help you," Pete said loudly. "And I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a respectable establishment, not a place for drifters and wannabes." Pete pressed a button on his wrist, and 2 security guards appeared within seconds. They were big humans in black uniforms with station security patches on their shoulders. One of them, a man named Tony, looked uncomfortable. He had seen Jake around the station before and knew he was important. But Pete was already talking to them. "These gentlemen will escort you out," Pete said with a nasty smile. "And don't come back unless you can afford to actually buy something." Jake looked at Pete for a long moment. His face showed no anger, just disappointment. "You know," he said, quietly, "I've met a lot of people in my travels. Some were aliens so different from humans that we could barely communicate. but I've learned that respect has nothing to do with what someone looks like or how they dress. It's about how you treat others. Save the philosophy lesson, Pete snapped. Tony, please remove this man from my store. Tony stepped forward reluctantly. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Jake nodded slowly. It's all right, Tony, I'll leave. He looked at Pete one more time. You might want to be more careful about who you judge in the future. You never know who might walk through that door. Pete laughed. What's that supposed to mean? Are you threatening me? Not at all, Jake said. Just friendly advice. Jake walked toward the door with the 2 security guards beside him. The other customers watched in silence. As they reached the entrance, Jake stopped and turned back to Pete. By the way, he said, the watch was for Commander Ryan Bell. Maybe you've heard of him. He was with me at the Battle of Kepler 442b. Good man. He saved a lot of lives that day. Pete's face went blank for a second, but then he shook his head. Nice try, now get out. The doors closed behind Jake, and Pete brushed off his hands like he had just taken out the garbage. He turned to his assistant, Lisa Chen, who had been watching everything from behind the register. Can you believe some people? Pete said. They think they can just walk in here and pretend to be somebody important. Starship Captain. He laughed and shook his head. Did you see those clothes? I bet he doesn't have 50 credits to his name. Lisa nodded, but she looked worried. Something about the whole situation felt wrong to her. The man had seemed so calm and confident even when Pete was being rude to him. And the way he had mentioned Commander Bell and that battle, it sounded real. Pete walked back to his counter, feeling proud of himself. He had protected his store from a time waster and shown the real customers that Kronos Elite maintained high standards. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, his world was about to fall apart. Pete walked back to his counter with a big smile on his face. He felt good about throwing out that strange man who had tried to waste his time. The other customers in the store were looking at expensive watches again, and everything seemed normal. Pete straightened some papers on his desk and checked his reflection in a small mirror. His hair was still perfect. Lisa Chen stood behind the register, but she could not stop thinking about what had just happened. Something felt wrong about the whole thing. The man had seemed so sure of himself, so calm even when Pete was being mean to him. Most people would have gotten angry or upset, but he had just accepted it and left quietly. Lisa, help that customer over there, Pete said, pointing to a woman looking at diamond watches. And make sure she knows about our payment plans. Lisa nodded and started to walk over, but then something beeped on the counter. It was the store's special communication system, the one that only important people could use. The screen showed an incoming call with high priority status. Lisa stopped and looked at the flashing red light. Pete, we have a priority call coming in, she said. Pete looked annoyed. Can't you see I'm busy? Take a message. It's marked as urgent, Lisa said, looking at the screen. It's from the Terran Defense Force headquarters. Pete's expression changed. The Terran Defense Force was the most powerful military organization in human space. They protected Earth and all the human colonies from alien threats. Only very important people worked there, and they did not call small businesses unless something serious was happening. Put it through to my office, Pete said quickly. He walked into his small office behind the main store and closed the door. Lisa stayed at the counter, but she could hear Pete's voice getting louder through the thin walls. She could not make out all the words, but she heard him say, yes, sir, and of course, several times. After 5 minutes, Pete came out of his office. His face was white as paper and his hands were shaking. He walked straight to Lisa without looking at any of the customers. Lisa, he whispered, I need you to look something up for me right away. What do you need? She asked. Look up Captain Jake Morrison. Use the military database now. Lisa's fingers moved quickly on her tablet. She typed in the name and waited for the results to load. When the information appeared on her screen, her mouth fell open. Oh my God, she whispered. The screen showed a picture of the man who had just been in their store. But this was not the same man Pete had seen. In the photo, Jake Morrison wore the dark blue uniform of a Terran Defense Force captain. His chest was covered with medals and ribbons. His eyes looked serious and strong, like someone who had seen terrible things and survived them. Lisa read the information out loud in a quiet voice. Captain Jake Morrison, age 42, commander of the MI, Starship Phoenix, youngest person ever promoted to captain in the Defense Force, hero of the Battle of Kepler 442b, winner of the Galactic Cross of Valor, the Star of Terra, and the Defense Medal with 3 clusters. Pete grabbed the tablet from her hands and read more. Saved over 50,000 civilians during the Zephyrian invasion, led the defense of the Arcturus system, survived the Andromeda deep space incident when his entire crew was lost except for him and his first officer. Pete's legs felt weak and he had to sit down on a chair. First officer, he said slowly. Commander Ryan Bell, the man he wanted to buy a watch for. Lisa kept reading from the tablet. Commander Ryan Bell, age 55, served with Captain Morrison for 15 years. Due to retire next month after 30 years of military service, also a war hero, saved Captain Morrison's life during the Andromeda incident. Pete put his head in his hands. The phone call had been from Admiral Kate Rodriguez herself, one of the most important people in the human military. She had wanted to arrange a private shopping appointment for Captain Morrison. She had called him the most famous human in the galaxy and a true hero. What did the Admiral want? Lisa asked. She wanted to set up a special shopping time for Captain Morrison, Pete said without looking up. She said he was coming to buy a retirement gift for his first officer. She wanted to make sure we gave him our best service and complete privacy. Lisa stared at Pete. And you threw him out of the store. I threw him out of the store, Pete repeated. His voice sounded dead. Lisa looked at the tablet again. There were hundreds of articles about Captain Morrison. He had been on the cover of Galaxy News magazine 6 times. There were stories about how he had refused to leave his crew behind during dangerous missions. There were interviews where he talked about treating all people with respect, no matter where they came from. Look at this, Lisa said, showing Pete another article. It says here that he always dresses like a regular person when he's not on duty. He doesn't like people to treat him special because of his job. Pete felt sick to his stomach. How long ago did he leave? Lisa looked at the clock on the wall. About 10 minutes ago. Pete jumped up from his chair so fast that he knocked it over. I have to find him. I have to apologize. Do you know where he went? He was walking toward the docking bays, Lisa said. But Pete, there are dozens of docking bays on this station. How will you find him? Pete was already moving toward the door. I'll search every single one if I have to, Lisa called after him. What about the store? What about the customers? Lock it up, Pete shouted over his shoulder. This is more important than anything. Pete ran out of the store and into the main corridor of the station. People looked at him strangely as he ran past them in his expensive suit. His perfect hair was getting messy, and sweat was starting to show on his forehead. He stopped at the information desk in the middle of the corridor. The alien behind the desk had green skin and 4 arms. Her name tag said, Zara. Excuse me, Pete said, breathing hard. I need to find someone. Captain Jake Morrison. He left about 10 minutes ago, heading toward the docking bays. Zara's 4 eyes lit up. Oh, Captain Morrison. Yes, I saw him walking that way. Such a nice man. He always stops to say hello when he comes through the station. Are you a friend of his? Pete's heart sank. Even the information desk clerk knew who Jake Morrison was. Something like that. Which docking bay did he go to? I think he was heading to Bay 94, Zara said. That's where the Phoenix is docked. Beautiful ship. Would you like me to call ahead and let him know you're coming? No, Pete said quickly. I mean, no thank you. I want to surprise him. Pete started running again, following the signs toward the docking bays. As he ran, he passed other stores and restaurants. He noticed that several shopkeepers called out greetings as he passed, asking him to say hello to Captain Morrison for them. Everyone seemed to know Jake Morrison. Everyone except Pete. Bay 94 was on the far side of the station. Pete had to take 2 moving walkways and an elevator to get there. By the time he arrived, he was completely out of breath and his Expensive suit was wrinkled and sweaty. He could see the docking bay ahead of him, and through the clear walls he could see a beautiful starship. It was sleek and powerful, with the name Phoenix painted on its side in gold letters. This was Captain Morrison's ship, the vessel that had fought in some of the most important battles in human history. Pete ran faster, hoping he was not too late. He had to fix this mistake before Captain Morrison left the station. His job, his reputation, and maybe even his life depended on it. Pete ran through the docking bay doors, his heart beating so fast he thought it might jump out of his chest. His expensive black suit was now wrinkled and wet with sweat. His perfect hair hung down over his forehead in messy strands. He had never run so hard in his entire life. The docking bay was huge, with a high ceiling and bright white lights. The starship Phoenix sat in the middle of the space like a sleeping giant. It was bigger than Pete had expected, maybe 300 feet long and painted in dark blue with gold trim. The ship looked both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Pete could see weapons mounted along its sides and knew this vessel had fought in real battles against alien enemies. Pete looked around frantically, trying to spot Jake Morrison somewhere in the busy docking bay. There were people everywhere, loading supplies and checking equipment. Some wore the blue uniforms of the Terran Defense Force, while others dressed like regular workers. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing, except for Pete. "Excuse me," Pete called out to a young woman carrying a box of electronic parts. "Have you seen Captain Morrison?" The woman stopped and smiled. "Oh yes, Captain Jake was here just a few minutes ago. He was talking to Commander Bell near the ship's entrance. Are you looking for him?" Pete nodded quickly. "Yes, it's very important that I find him." "He might still be on board," the woman said, "but they're getting ready to leave soon. The Phoenix has orders to depart within the hour." Pete felt panic rising in his throat. If Jake left the station, Pete might never get another chance to apologize. He might lose his job, his reputation, everything he had worked for. Even worse, he would have to live with the knowledge that he had treated a genuine hero like garbage. Pete ran toward the ship's entrance, where a ramp led up to an open doorway. 2 guards in military uniforms stood at the bottom of the ramp. They looked strong and serious, like men who had seen combat. "Stop right there," one of the guards said as Pete approached. His name tag read, "Sergeant Davis." "This is a restricted area. Do you have permission to board?" Pete stopped running and tried to catch his breath. "I need to see Captain Morrison. It's urgent." "What's your name and business?" Sergeant Davis asked. "My name is Pete Hamilton. I manage Kronos Elite, the watch store. I need to apologize to the captain." The 2 guards looked at each other. "Apologize for what?" the second guard asked. Pete felt his face turn red with shame. "I made a terrible mistake. I didn't recognize the captain when he came to my store. I treated him badly and had him removed by security." Sergeant Davis raised his eyebrows. "You had Captain Morrison removed from your store?" "Yes," Pete whispered. "I thought he was just some drifter trying to waste my time. I didn't know who he was." The guards exchanged another look, and Pete could see they were trying not to laugh. "Sir," Sergeant Davis said, "I'm afraid the captain is busy preparing for departure. He doesn't have time for visitors right now." "Please," Pete begged. "Just 5 minutes. I need to make this right." Before the guards could answer, a voice came from behind Pete. "What's all the noise down here?" Pete turned around and saw a man in his 50s walking toward them. He wore the uniform of a Defense Force commander, and his gray hair was cut short. His face was lined with age and experience, but his eyes were kind. This had to be Commander Ryan Bell, Jake Morrison's first officer. "Commander," Sergeant Davis said, "this gentleman wants to see Captain Morrison. He says he needs to apologize for something." Commander Bell looked at Pete with interest. "Are you the man from the watch store?" Pete nodded miserably. "Yes, sir, I made a horrible mistake. I didn't recognize Captain Morrison, and I had him thrown out of my store." Commander Bell studied Pete for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Jake told me what happened. He wasn't angry about it, you know. He was more disappointed than anything else." "I know I don't deserve it," Pete said, "but I'm begging you to let me apologize to him. I've learned who he really is. what he's done for humanity. I feel sick about how I treated him." Commander Bell was quiet for a few seconds, thinking. "The captain is on the bridge right now, going over our flight plans. We're scheduled to leave soon." Pete felt his heart sink. "I understand. I'm too late." "However," Commander Bell continued, "Jake is a fair man. He believes everyone deserves a second chance. Come with me." Commander Bell led Pete up the ramp and into the ship. The inside of the Phoenix was even more impressive than the outside. The corridors were wide and clean, with soft blue lighting along the walls. Pete could hear the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the distant sound of people working. As they walked through the ship, Pete saw crew members going about their duties. Some were human, but others were clearly alien. He saw a tall being with blue skin checking computer screens and another creature that looked like a walking tree examining some kind of machinery. Everyone worked together like they were part of one big family. "Captain Morrison commands a very diverse crew," Commander Bell explained as they walked. "We have people from 20 different worlds serving on this ship. The captain treats everyone the same, no matter what they look like or where they come from." Pete felt even worse about his behavior. "I'm starting to understand what kind of man he is. Jake has a saying," Commander Bell said. "He says that respect is the only currency that matters in space. You can't buy it, you can't steal it, and you can't fake it. You have to earn it by how you treat others." They took an elevator up several levels and walked down another corridor. Pete noticed that everyone they passed greeted Commander Bell with genuine warmth and respect. These people were not just following orders, they truly cared about their officers. Finally, they stopped in front of a door marked Bridge. Commander Bell pressed a button on the wall, and the door slid open with a soft sound. The bridge was the most amazing room Pete had ever seen. It was circular, with a large chair in the center and computer stations all around the walls. Through the huge windows at the front, Pete could see the stars and other ships docked at the station. Jake Morrison sat in the captain's chair, reading something on a tablet. He wore the same casual clothes as before, but now Pete could see the quiet authority in the way he held himself. This was clearly a man who had commanded respect across the galaxy. "Captain," Commander Bell said, "we have a visitor." Jake looked up and saw Pete standing in the doorway. Pete expected to see anger or annoyance in Jake's eyes, but instead he saw only calm interest. "Mr. Hamilton from the watch store," Jake said. "I wasn't expecting to see you again." Pete stepped forward, on shaking legs. "Captain Morrison, I came to apologize. I made a terrible mistake and I'm deeply sorry." Jake gestured to a chair near his captain's seat. "Please sit down. You look like you've been running." Pete sat down gratefully, still breathing hard from his chase through the station. Now that he was here, facing the man he had insulted, he did not know what to say. How do you apologize to someone who has saved entire worlds? Pete sat in the chair on the bridge of the Phoenix, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Around him, the crew continued their work, preparing the ship for departure. Some glanced at him with curious looks, but most were too busy to pay attention to the sweaty man in the wrinkled suit. Jake Morrison leaned back in his captain's chair and studied Pete with calm eyes. There was no anger in his face, no hatred or desire for revenge. This made Pete feel even worse somehow. If Jake had been furious, Pete could have understood that. But this quiet disappointment was much harder to handle. "I'm listening," Jake said simply. Pete tried to speak, but his throat felt dry. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Captain Morrison, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. When you came into my store, I judged you by your clothes and your appearance. I treated you like you were nobody important. I was completely wrong, and I'm deeply ashamed of myself." Jake nodded slowly but said nothing. His silence made Pete feel like he needed to explain more. "After you left, Admiral Rodriguez called my store. She wanted to arrange a private shopping appointment for you. That's when I realized who you really are." Pete's voice was shaking now. "I looked up your military record. I read about all the things you've done, all the lives you've saved. You're a hero, and I treated you like garbage." Commander Bell, who had been standing near the door, stepped forward. "Captain, if I may say something." Jake looked at his first officer and nodded. "Mr. Hamilton has been running all over the station looking for you," Commander Bell said. "He could have just hidden in his store and hoped you would never come back. Instead, he came here to face you and apologize. That takes courage." Pete looked at Commander Bell gratefully, then turned back to Jake. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I had to try to make this right. I want to offer you anything in my store. Any watch, any piece of jewelry completely free. The rarest chronometers, pieces worth more than most people make in 10 years. It's the least I can do." Jake was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars through the bridge windows. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Mr. Hamilton, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Captain, anything." "Why did you treat me the way you did? What made you decide I wasn't worth your time?" Pete felt his face burn with shame. "Your clothes, the way you dressed. You looked like—" He stopped, realizing how terrible this sounded. "Like what?" Jake asked gently. "Like someone who couldn't afford to shop in my store," Pete finished quietly. "I thought you were wasting my time. I get people sometimes who come in just to look at expensive things they can't buy. I assumed you were one of them." Jake nodded. "I see. And what do you think now?" Pete looked around the bridge at the diverse crew working together. He saw humans and aliens side by side, all wearing the same uniforms, all treated with the same respect. "I think I've been an idiot my whole life. I think I've been judging people by things that don't matter at all." A young woman with green skin and silver hair approached Jake's chair. She wore the uniform of a communications officer. "Captain, we have clearance for departure whenever you're ready." "Thank you, Lieutenant Kara," Jake said. "Please tell the Port Authority we'll be leaving in 20 minutes. Pete realized his time was running out. Soon Jake would leave the station, and Pete would have to live with his mistake forever. "Captain, please let me give you something from my store. I know it won't make up for how I treated you, but it would help me feel like I did something right." Jake turned back to Pete. "You know, Mr. Hamilton, I've been thinking about what happened in your store. It reminded me of something that happened to me many years ago." Pete leaned forward, listening carefully. "I was 19 years old, fresh out of the military academy. I had just been assigned to my first ship as the youngest officer on board. I was excited and nervous, and I wanted to make a good impression on my new crew." Jake paused, lost in the memory. "The ship docked at a station much like this one, and I decided to visit the officers' club. I had saved up money to buy a decent meal and maybe meet some experienced officers who could give me advice." "What happened?" Pete asked. "The doorman took one look at me and decided I was too young to be a real officer. He thought I was some kid playing dress-up in a uniform. He wouldn't let me in, no matter what I said. He called security and had me removed, just like what happened to you today." Pete felt sick. "I'm so sorry, Captain. I did the same thing to you that was done to you." Jake held up his hand. "Let me finish the story. I was embarrassed and angry, and I went back to my ship feeling terrible about myself. But my captain, an old man named Captain Harris, saw what had happened. He took me aside and taught me something I've never forgotten." "What did he teach you?" "He said that the doorman's behavior told me nothing about my own worth, but it told me everything about his character. He said that someday when I was in a position of authority, I would have the choice to treat people the way I had been treated, or to treat them better. He made me promise that I would always choose to treat them better." Pete stared at Jake, beginning to understand. "That's why I'm not angry with you, Mr. Hamilton," Jake continued. "You made a mistake, but you're here, trying to fix it. That matters more than the mistake itself." Commander Bell smiled. "The captain has always lived by that promise. I've served with him for 15 years, and I've never seen him treat anyone with disrespect, no matter who they were." Jake stood up from his chair and walked over to Pete. "I don't want your expensive watches or jewelry, Mr. Hamilton, but I will accept your apology, and I'll make you the same deal Captain Harris made with me." "What kind of deal?" Pete asked. "Promise me that the next time someone walks into your store, you'll judge them by their character, not by their appearance. Promise me you'll treat everyone with the same respect you would show to your most important customer." Pete stood up and looked Jake in the eyes. "I promise, Captain Morrison." I swear to you that I will never make this mistake again." Jake extended his hand and Pete shook it firmly. "Then we have a deal." But Jake wasn't finished yet. He had one more surprise for Pete that would change everything. Jake Morrison stood in front of Pete, still holding his hand in a firm handshake. But instead of letting go, Jake looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Hamilton, I have a proposition for you," Jake said. "Your promise is a good start, but I think you need to understand what real respect looks like. Words are easy to say, but actions are what matter." Pete felt nervous. "What do you mean, Captain?" "I want you to spend a week aboard the Phoenix with my crew. You'll work alongside them, eat with them, and see how people from different worlds can work together when they treat each other with dignity." Pete's eyes went wide. "You want me to come with you? On your ship? But I don't know anything about space travel or military service." Commander Bell stepped forward with a smile. "Don't worry, Mr. Hamilton. We're not going into battle. We have a routine patrol mission to 3 peaceful systems. You'll be perfectly safe, and we can always use an extra pair of hands." "But my store," Pete protested. "I can't just leave my business." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you just offer me anything in your store to make up for your mistake? This is what I want. 1 week of your time to learn what you really need to." "No." Pete thought about this. He had promised Jake anything, and now Jake was asking for something that couldn't be bought with money. Pete realized he had no choice, and maybe this was exactly what he needed. "All right," Pete said slowly. "I'll do it, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to do on a starship." "You'll figure it out," Jake said with a small smile. "Commander Bell, please show Mr. Hamilton to guest quarters and get him some work clothes. We depart in 15 minutes. Pete followed Commander Bell through the corridors of the Phoenix, his head spinning with everything that had happened. Just 2 hours ago, he had been the successful manager of an expensive store. Now he was about to travel through space with some of the most famous people in the galaxy. Commander Bell showed Pete to a small but comfortable room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out into space. "This will be your quarters for the week," he said. "There are work clothes in the closet that should fit you. Change into them and meet me in the main corridor in 10 minutes. Pete changed out of his expensive suit and put on the simple blue work clothes he found in the closet. They were comfortable and practical, nothing like the fancy clothes he usually wore. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he looked like any regular worker, not like an important store manager. Commander Bell was waiting for him in the corridor. "Much better," he said. "Now you look like someone who's ready to work. Let me show you around the ship and introduce you to some of the crew." Their first stop was the engine room, where Pete met Chief Engineer Maria Santos. She was a small woman with grease on her hands and a big smile on her face. Next to her stood an alien that looked like a giant lizard with 4 arms. "This is Chief Santos and her assistant Vex," Commander Bell explained. "They keep the Phoenix running smoothly." "Nice to meet you," Maria said, shaking Pete's hand with her dirty one. "Commander Bell told me you're going to be working with us this week. Ever worked on a starship engine before?" Pete shook his head. "I've never worked on any kind of engine." Vex spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together, but his words were friendly. "Do not worry, new friend, we will teach you. Everyone starts somewhere." Pete was surprised by how welcome they made him feel. In his store, he had always been the boss, the one in charge. Here, he was the newcomer who knew nothing, but nobody made him feel stupid or unwanted. Next, they visited the medical bay, where Pete met Dr. Lisa Park and her assistant, an alien with blue skin and 6 arms who could work on multiple patients at the same time. Then they went to the communications center, where a young man named Tony worked alongside a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish with glowing tentacles. In every part of the ship, Pete saw the same thing: humans and aliens working together, as equals. Nobody cared what anyone looked like or where they came from. The only thing that mattered was whether they did their job well and treated their teammates with respect. "I don't understand," Pete said to Commander Bell as they walked to the dining hall. "How do all these different species get along so well? Some of them don't even look human." Commander Bell stopped walking and turned to face Pete. "That's exactly the lesson Captain Morrison wants you to learn. Look, when I first joined the military 20 years ago, I had the same prejudices you did. I thought humans were better than aliens, that we should stick to our own kind. What changed your mind? Captain Morrison saved my life during our first mission together. We were exploring a dangerous planet when our shuttle crashed. I was trapped under some wreckage and there was a fire spreading toward me. The captain could have escaped safely, but instead he stayed behind to pull me out. Commander Bell's voice became serious. But here's the important part. After he saved me, an alien crew member, one of those lizard people like Vex, carried me to safety while the captain fought off hostile creatures. That alien risked his own life for a human he barely knew. Pete listened carefully, beginning to understand. Later, when I was recovering in the medical bay, I realized something important. That alien didn't save me because I was human or because we looked alike. He saved me because I was his teammate, his friend. That's when I learned that loyalty and courage have nothing to do with what species you are. They entered the dining hall, where crew members were eating their evening meal. Pete saw humans and aliens sitting together at the same tables, sharing food and laughing at jokes. It looked like a big family dinner, not like the cold, formal business meetings Pete was used to. Captain Morrison waved them over to his table, where he was eating with several crew members. "Mr. Hamilton, come join us. I want you to meet some more of my people." Pete sat down next to a tall alien with purple skin and tentacles instead of hair. The alien introduced himself as Commander Zach, the ship's navigation officer. "Commander Bell tells me you run a luxury store," Zach said in perfect English. "That must be interesting work." Pete felt embarrassed. "It's not as important as what you do here." Zach tilted his head. "Every job is important if you do it well and treat people fairly. The galaxy needs people who can create beautiful things, just like it needs people who can navigate starships." As Pete ate dinner and talked with the crew, he began to see something amazing. These people had created a small society where everyone was valued, where differences were celebrated instead of feared. It was everything his exclusive store was not. 7 days later, Pete Hamilton stood on the bridge of the Phoenix as the ship approached Neo-Geneva Orbital Station. Through the large windows, he could see the familiar lights of the place he called home. But everything looked different to him now. The station seemed smaller somehow, and he felt like he was seeing it with new eyes. During his week aboard the ship, Pete had worked in the engine room with Maria and Vex. He had helped Dr. Park organize medical supplies. He had even assisted Tony in the communications center, learning how to send messages across the galaxy. Every day brought new experiences and new friends. The alien crew members had been especially patient with him. When Pete made mistakes, they helped him learn without making him feel stupid. When he struggled with unfamiliar technology, they showed him again and again until he understood. Pete had never experienced this kind of teamwork in his expensive store, where everything was about competition and making money. "Mr. Hamilton," Captain Morrison said, approaching Pete on the bridge. "How are you feeling about going back to your old life?" Pete thought about this question carefully. "Honestly, Captain, I'm not sure I can go back to my old life. This week has changed me. I see things differently now." Commander Bell joined them at the window. "What will you do differently?" "Everything," Pete said firmly. "The way I treat customers, the way I hire employees, the way I think about what's really important. I used to think success meant keeping certain people out of my store. Now I realize that real success means welcoming everyone in." Captain Morrison nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what I hoped you would learn." The ship docked at the station with a gentle bump. Pete gathered his few belongings and prepared to leave the Phoenix. He had arrived wearing an expensive suit, but now he wore the simple work clothes that had become comfortable during his week of real labor. As he walked toward the exit, crew members stopped to say goodbye. Vex gave him a small tool as a remembrance. Dr. Park handed him a book about alien cultures. Tony promised to send him messages from their travels. "Thank you for everything," Pete said to each of them. "You've all taught me so much." Captain Morrison and Commander Bell walked with Pete through the docking bay toward the station entrance. "Remember your promise," Jake said quietly. "Judge people by their actions, not their appearance." "I will never forget," Pete replied. "But Captain, I still want to do something for Commander Bell. He's retiring soon and he deserves that watch." Jake smiled. Actually, I'd like to come to your store and buy it properly. Will you sell it to me? Pete's eyes lit up. Of course. It would be an honor. 2 hours later, Pete unlocked the doors of Kronos Elite for the first time in a week. The store looked exactly the same, but Pete felt like a completely different person walking into it. Lisa Chen was waiting for him, having managed the store while he was gone. Pete, Lisa said, running to greet him. How was your trip? I can't believe you actually went into space with Captain Morrison. It was the best week of my life, Pete said honestly. Lisa, we need to make some changes around here. Before Lisa could ask what he meant, the door chimed and customers began to enter. The first was an elderly alien with gray skin and 3 eyes. In the past, Pete would have watched this customer carefully, assuming he might steal something. Now Pete walked over with a genuine smile. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Kronos Elite. How can I help you today? The alien looked surprised by Pete's friendly greeting. I'm looking for a gift for my grandson. He's graduating from the Space Academy next month. Congratulations to him, Pete said warmly. Let me show you some pieces that would be perfect for a young officer. As Pete helped the alien customer, more people entered the store. There was a young human woman in casual clothes, a family with children, and an alien couple holding hands. Pete noticed that Lisa watched in amazement as he treated every customer with the same respect and attention, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. The door chimed again, and Pete looked up to see Captain Morrison and Commander Bell entering together. Commander Bell wore his dress uniform with all his medals, while Captain Morrison still wore his simple leather jacket and jeans. Captain Morrison, Pete called out happily. Commander Bell, welcome to my store. Other customers turned to look, and Pete heard whispers of recognition. These people knew they were seeing real heroes, but Pete treated them exactly the same as everyone else. I'm here to buy that watch for my first officer, Captain Morrison said. Pete led them to a special display case containing the rarest timepieces in the store. I have several pre-war Earth models. This Patek Philippe is from 1955, before the colony wars began. It's been restored to perfect condition. Commander Bell examined the watch carefully. It's beautiful, he said quietly. It's perfect for a man who has served with such honor, Pete said. Commander, I've heard about your service record. 30 years of protecting humanity. This watch will remind you every day of the respect and gratitude that people feel for you. Captain Morrison paid for the watch, and Pete carefully wrapped it in a special box. As he handed it over, Pete felt proud to be part of this moment between two friends who had served together for so many years. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, Commander Bell said. This means more to me than you know. After they left, Pete continued, helping customers for the rest of the day. He assisted a young couple buying their first expensive watch together. He helped a grandmother choose a gift for her alien daughter-in-law. He even spent an hour with a teenager who couldn't afford anything but was fascinated by the mechanical watches. As closing time approached, Lisa walked over to Pete with a puzzled expression. I don't understand what happened to you out there, but you're like a completely different person. You've been kind to everyone today, even people who obviously can't afford to buy anything. Pete smiled. I learned something important, Lisa. Respect isn't about how much money someone has or what they look like. It's about treating every person like they matter, because they do. That evening, Pete made plans to change everything about his store. He would hire employees from different backgrounds. He would welcome all customers equally. He would create a place where everyone felt valued and respected. 6 months later, Kronos Elite had become famous throughout the sector, not just for its expensive watches, but for its exceptional service to all customers. Pete had kept his promise to Captain Morrison, and in doing so, he had discovered what real success looked like. The galaxy was a little bit better because one person had learned to see others with new eyes.